name is Bill Bishop. You and I have met before.
Yes.
And you and I have spoken before.
Yes.
But we've never spoken about Mr. Daniel or this case.
That's correct.
Now, when you first started talking to the jury in this case, you indicated that when you interview somebody, you go in with the assumption that they're going to give you a story more favorable to them.
Yes.
What exact words did you use?
I assume that personal bias is going to be present.
Okay. And if someone were asking you, for instance, to do an assessment, an evaluation for employment, perhaps, some employment that requires a psychological assessment to get a job, you would assume that bias would tend to be more favorable, make them look like a better person.
Right.
Would it be fair to say that in a case where someone is facing the potential of the death penalty, their bias is actually kind of the opposite, to make themselves look more trouble?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, do you agree that it's in Mr. Daniel's best interest to have someone come in here and testify as to historical factors that could be considered mitigating?
Yes.
And your primary source of that information is him.
That and records I reviewed, yes.
And you indicated that you reviewed the records, but did you ever speak to his mother?
No.
Did you ever speak to his father?
No.
Did you ever speak to his sister Samantha?
No.
Did you ever speak to Jenna or Nikki?
No.
And did he relay to you the visit to a psychiatrist or psychologist in the 6th grade?
Yes.
And that was in the records as well?
Yes.
Did you make any efforts to identify that psychiatrist or psychologist?
No.
Any efforts to get the records from that visit?
No.
Were you made aware of any diagnosis or prescriptions or any follow-up plan given as a result of that examination in the 6th grade?
I didn't see it, no.
And he didn't tell you of that either?
No.
He didn't tell you he was diagnosed?
No.
And when you were describing his self-report as a teen and a preteen, I believe you indicated that he told you he didn't have any friends?
Correct.
He did not make mention of a friend he used to play guitar with?
Right. No. By saying that he didn't have friends, I don't know that that means he didn't associate with people, but in terms of close buddies, he indicated he did not have those. I'm assuming that he did associate with people.
Would it surprise you that in letters to his mother, in references to codes, he tells her to use the names of the friends he played guitar with and the friends he rode motorcycles with as clues that she could insert into codes?
That would not surprise me.
But yet, through that, you would assume that his mother knows who these friends were by that description.
Right.
So he obviously thought of them as friends.
Yes.
And his mother obviously thinks of them as friends.
Apparently so.
And you also had an opportunity to go through his disciplinary reports. I think you described primarily from high school.
Yes. And college.
And a good number of those disciplinary reports from high school, he's acting in concert or with co-conspirators. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
He and others are sneaking around the halls or sneaking out of class.
Correct.
He and others are using drugs behind the Hobby Lobby.
Right.
And he described those as the same people he used to go ride motorcycles with.
Right.
But in your opinion, that's not inconsistent with saying he didn't have friends?
In saying that he didn't have friends, I think how I would classify that is that the closeness of his friendships was not what you or I might have experienced when we were young. Having close friends and having associates, there's a blurred line between the two of them, but there's probably some difference.
And absent his self-report, those disciplinary records are just as consistent with someone with a group of friends who's acting like teenagers act.
True.
And he also indicated to you that he didn't have girlfriends.
Yes.
And you read that one of his disciplinaries was actually for showing affection on campus.
Yes.
With a female.
Right.
And obviously the report doesn't indicate whether it was a regular girlfriend or not. But
right.
That's not consistent with saying I never had any girlfriend.
True. True.
And in those disciplinary records, he does have some history in high school of being assaulted. Is that true?
Yes.
And in fact, he assaulted another boy in kind of a locker room situation in what we would probably call a sucker punch.
I saw that, yes.
And one of the reasons he was referred at that time to try to get follow-up help was because whoever was writing the disciplinary report was concerned that he didn't show any remorse.
Right.
And then you also documented that there was documentation of a suicide, not attempt, but comments he would make regarding suicide.
Right.
Do you recall one of those being a statement that he would commit suicide in the future to commemorate Columbine?
Yes.
And do you know where he was from in Colorado?
I don't know Colorado well. I think he's from the Denver area, a suburb.
Okay,
Is that correct?
I don't know where Columbine is.
Yeah. It's in the Denver area too, I believe, a suburb.
And then one of the things you documented was that your assessment, your diagnosis of Mr. Daniel would be major depression.
Yes.
And you stated that that major depression is not uncommon.
Correct.
Do you know how common it is?
Approximately 40% of the adult population will have depression at some point in their time.
So 4 out of 10 people in this courtroom statistically suffer at some point from major depression.
Not necessarily major depression, but a depressive episode.
I believe you also indicated that people who suffer from depressive episodes or major depression typically are able to know that their depressive states are not good or normal.
Yes.
Is that one of the things you
Yes.
said? And so, in a sober moment perhaps, then someone in that suffering from major depression or depressive episodes would know that those episodes aren't normal.
Correct.
And they would know that it's not usual to be in that state.
Right. Even when they're in the depths of their depression, they understand that's not good and it's not normal.
I'm going to read to you from a letter from Mr. Daniel dated 6/20/2012. It's been admitted as State's Exhibit 91. And he basically says, I just got out of the suicide hole or slick cell. They first put me in there because when they asked me if I was going to hurt myself, I said jokingly, I don't see anything sharp in here. Sometimes these guys are so stupid. Is that consistent with someone in a depressive episode or major depression?
That's a smart aleck remark. Granted, when a person is depressed, one of the things they can do is to be cynical or sarcastic or irritable. I'm not saying that means he was by default depressed, but I think it all ties together. The negativity he felt about himself extended to others, and so he was a cynical person.
And it's also possible that he didn't take his depressive episodes or major depression, he didn't believe he had that, and it wasn't until many months later he met with you that he decided it would benefit him to ideate those.
Yes,
Possible?
yes, that's possible.
One of the things you testified to, and I don't really know if this is how you meant it, but it seemed to me that you were describing Brandon Daniel blaming Nikki for his entry into the Austin drug world.
I would not say that he blamed her. I think he used her to gain entry into that world. That's probably a better characterization.
So it was never expressed to you as anything he was unwilling or not wanting to do himself.
Correct.
She was just an avenue to get there.
Correct.
Would you describe that as manipulative?
Yes.
How would you differentiate that for your further documentation that you didn't feel like he had, or I'm sorry, that you felt Brandon Daniel had a low need to control others?
Some people like to be in charge of people just simply because of the power surge they feel. I recognize and understand that some of his behaviors were controlling in nature and that he did put people in their place, so to speak. But I think in general, he prefers being allowed to be by himself, and he doesn't mind if people stay away from him. He doesn't seek people out, in other words, specifically for control. That doesn't mean that he doesn't engage in controlling acts, though.
So the fact that he doesn't thrive on it doesn't mean he does not display a lot of manipulation in his behavior?
That's correct.
And that's before and after this offense.
Correct.
And in States 93, I want to read to you from a letter addressed to Jenna Phelan. It does not bear a date, but it does reference the Boston Marathon bombings, which have been within the
Last April.
so about a year ago. And in that he says, just a reminder, capital letters, do not, in normal letters, talk to anyone about me, including my lawyers, mitigator, private eyes, etc., until I _twice say okay. Doesn't that seem to be a desire to manipulate or control Jenna?
Yes.
You describe Mr. Daniel as having difficulty stepping outside of himself and into others' point of view. Another word for that is empathy, is that correct?
Correct.
And he does not display that?
Not real strongly.
And then further on, I believe it was when you were talking about our desire to help injured children or abused children and our lack of desire to help those same adults later.
Right.
You said that someone would be unable to appreciate those who might help him. Is that an assumption or a generality, or is that a specific diagnosis of Mr. Daniel?
No, I was speaking of him, that we might assume that he would not appreciate those who would help him or take advantage of opportunities for help. We oftentimes would make that assumption of a person who does something as heinous as kill a police officer.
And I take it from the way that you say we might assume that you don't necessarily believe that.
It may or may not be true today, and it may or may not be true tomorrow. You see what I'm saying? He may have had that mindset at the time of the offense. I don't know if he did have it. If he did, I don't know that he will forever have that mindset.
So you can't say that he does appreciate those who might help him. That's
Correct.
not what you're saying.
No, I can't say that definitively and in all circumstances.
And you also stated that people can make adjustments and they can go up or down.
Correct.
And that means they can improve or choose not to improve.
Correct.
And it's not really anything anyone else can do to make those changes in those directions.
Right. And my point there is that none of us remain stagnant throughout life. We change. We ebb and we flow. We move up and down and so forth.
You indicated that Mr. Daniel had trouble leaving bad relationships until their inevitable collapse.
Correct.
Did he tell you that he initially broke up with Ms. Phelan?
I know that there had been some breakups.
But did he tell you that the last breakup was actually at his inception?
I think he took fault for it or took the blame for it. My impression was from him that she left him because she finally got fed up with him.
So if she said something different in this court, that would be inconsistent with his personal story he told you?
Correct.
Again, when you were speaking of the children versus adults, I think one of the slides or one of the bullet points you had was that when adults participate in a crime, we assume they should know better.
Yes.
Regardless of your level of depression, isn't that a fair assumption that you would know not to kill a police officer?
Yes.
So you're not saying that he didn't know better.
That's exactly right. I'm not saying that.
And you weren't asked to assess for insanity.
Right. I don't think that was an issue.
And insanity is in law when, because of mental defect or illness, you are unable to realize your behavior is wrong.
Correct.
And you're not, that's not what you mean by that slide.
No.
When you say that when adults participate in a crime, we assume they should know better, what did Mr. Daniel specifically say about April 6, 2012?
Since I don't have that recorded, I can't specifically say. If I could give my general understanding, he knew that he was going into the Walmart to steal. He took a gun with him. I don't know that he went in there with the intention of killing anybody. He had a gun, though, just in case, whatever that means. An opportunity presented itself. He was apprehended, and he pulled out the pistol and he made use of it.
And did he say what just in case meant?
I don't know that we discussed that.
You didn't think that was important?
Oh, yes. But
you didn't ask?
no, when he did not go, we talked about his intentions when he went into the store. He did not go in there because I specifically asked him, did you go in there with the intent to hurt anybody or to kill anybody or to shoot anybody? Because I knew that he took a gun in with him. And I knew that it was not his practice to carry a gun with him most of the time. His statement was, no, he did not go in there with that stated intent idea.
But he didn't give you what his intent or idea was by taking the gun?
Not other than in case he needed it, maybe to scare somebody off or something of that nature. That's the most I got from him regarding that.
And he told you he knew it was a police officer?
Yes.
And he told you basically at that moment he knew the police officer was dead?
Yes. He assumed he was dead.
By the extent of the injury and
right.
Things like that. One of the things you stated was that anyone can seek out help and change.
Yes.
And on the flip side of that too, anyone can refuse to or not seek out help. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In one of your slides you had in your PowerPoint was basically a series of questions of how Mr. Daniel might be different if. And
right.
there was a series of factors.
Right.
And that's all speculation.
Correct.
There's no way any of us, not you, anybody here can go back and find out how he would have been but for.
Correct.
I think it was the second to last page. One of the questions asked on the slide was, does Brandon Daniel have the capacity to someday live and work in society without posing a threat to others? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And I believe you testified that you've testified before in death penalty cases.
Yes.
Have you ever been asked to assess future danger?
Yes.
And that statement right there sounds a lot like our future danger question, doesn't it?
It touches on it, yes.
It uses society, posing
Mm-hmm.
a threat. It's many of the same words,
Yes.
reworded to a point where it's slightly different.
Yes.
But you were specifically asked not to assess future danger in this case, is that correct?
Correct.
And what are some of the tools you use when you do assess future danger?
There are specific tools that are designed for that purpose. There's a hair psychopathy checklist, which assesses for psychopathology. I like to make use of what's referred to as HCR 20 risk assessment, historical clinical risk analysis. It has one look at a person's history and their history of various criminal acts, family concerns, substance abuse, things of that nature, mental illness, the presence or absence of personality disorders in combination with their current clinical presentation, their current mental health status, to aid in making decisions about one's future comportment or behavior.
And those are what we would call objective tests. Is that fair to say?
Objective in that they press the examiner, meaning the psychologist or psychiatrist, whoever is doing the examination, to look at specific issues and address specific issues we know to be associated with future misconduct.
And if administered and scored correctly, comparisons can be made across a great number of people studied.
Correct.
And that's what lends the credibility to those tests, because doctor in one city or day can look and compare to another test.
Correct.
And did you perform any of those tests in this case?
I did not.
And was that because you were not asked to testify regarding future danger?
Yes.
indicated that some of the shortcomings of those tests are that certain triggers are not available in prison. Is that what you said?
I don't know that I'd say that's a shortcoming to that instrument.
Okay. And some of the triggers you named, I believe, were the inability to access drugs.
Right. Yeah, I think what you're referring to there, and if I can clarify, if you don't mind, is that some of the elements that led or lead a person to do wrongful acts, for example, abusing drugs, abusing alcohol, being in bad relations, and by that I mean opposite sex relationships, those kinds of things, they're not evident in a prison setting. You can't have those kinds of opportunities. Not
legally, but you recognize that drugs are available in prison.
I do know that.
And alcohol is available in prison.
Right.
And there are certainly relationships in prison.
Right.
Not opposite sex, because they don't house them together. But
right. No, I understand all that.
And so it's not entirely true that those aren't possible.
It's true.
And were you aware in this particular case that Mr. Daniel had been caught or recorded for hoarding medication?
Yes, I was aware of that.
At times not taking the medication he was asked to take?
Yes.
Or prescribed to take?
Right.
That he was cited for making hooch, making his own alcohol and stuff?
Right.
So not only is it possible to get those things, he's actually demonstrated a willingness to do so.
Correct.
And one of the things you testified to was that in your interview with Mr. Daniel, what was his explanation for being sent to a military school in Kansas? Sir, we can approach. And Doctor, I want to direct your attention back to the high school disciplinary reports that we were speaking of earlier. And as to the the assault that occurred in the, I believe it was the boys' locker room of the high school.
Right.
Based on the disciplinary reports, that I described it as a sucker punch. Is that fair to
Right.
say?
Right.
And specifically, Mr. Daniel reached out his hand in an apparent effort to reconcile, and then proceeded to punch the other student about 3 times, who didn't respond physically at all.
That's my understanding.
And again, whoever wrote that report, one of their primary concerns was the apparent lack of remorse for that behavior after the fact.
Correct.
Pass it.
We have no additional questions about
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Carnegie will from this, so, yeah.
I,
Mr. Dry, at this time, we consent with call Miraj Aurora.
You do solemnly swear the testimony which you may not give given before this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Mr. Aurora, would you please state your name, spelling both your first and last name, please?
Neeraj Arora, Neeraj Aroara.
Okay. And Mr. Aurora, how are you currently employed?
I'm a software development manager at Hewlett Packard.
Okay. And how long have you been a software deployment manager?
Development manager.
Okay. Development manager. Okay. How long have you been employed as such?
Since 2005.
Okay. And has your work with Hewlett Packard always been here in the Austin area?
That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
And what are your job duties?
I have a team of software developers responsible for developing software products for HP for their servers division, and I have a team of 8 people who report to me right now.
Okay. And at some point, did you come in contact with an individual by the name of Brandon Daniel?
I did.
Okay. And how was he employed by HP and assigned to you? How did that happen?
Yes, he was employed at HP, was hired by a different manager at HP, and after a few months, he was transferred to report to me and work in my team for 7 to 8 months.
Okay. And who was his prior manager?
Mr. Dean Stevenson.
Okay. And were you the one that was in charge of hiring Mr. Daniel, or was the previous manager?
It was not me, it was the prior manager.
Okay. And during that, you said it was 6 to 8 months. Is that how much you said?
When it reported to me,
Yes.
yes, it was around 7, 8 months.
Okay. 7, 8. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. And during that time, did you have an opportunity to observe Mr. Daniel's work and evaluate his work as well?
Yes, I did not do a performance evaluation, but he was reporting to me, so I had knowledge of his activities, yes.
Okay. Do you know if, and just so we're clear, Mr. Daniel worked for HP before you became his manager?
That's right.
All right. And it was another manager that was hired him, not you?
That's right.
Do you know if in the time that Mr. Daniel worked at HP, whether he was promoted at all?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And was that promotion accompanied by a raise?
I believe so. I think so, yes.
Okay. Do you know approximately what Mr. Daniel's salary was?
Approximately around $65,000 to $70,000.
And But while he was with you in that 7 to 8 month time span, he didn't get another promotion or raise during that?
No, he did not, no.
Okay. So, with regard to your contact with Mr. Daniel, he was one of the 8 people that you would supervise?
Yes.
So, can you describe what sort of employee he was?
Technically, as a programmer, he was good. He did his work that was assigned to him. So I had most knowledge I had of him was around technical things, and he knew what he was doing.
Okay. So, can you tell me what his personality was at work? Was he reserved, or was he outgoing?
I would say reserved.
Okay. Now, you and I had a little talk about that before. I hate to generalize things, but you said to me that a lot of engineers are reserved, so that doesn't really surprise you very much.
Yeah, I mean, software engineers generally are reserved. That's true.
Okay. But was he more so, or was
He was a little more than usual. Yeah, I would say that.
okay? So during the time that he worked for you, or with HP, are you aware of any disciplinary problems that he may have had?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So at some point in late March, early April, did there come times where Mr. Daniel might miss more work than usual, or send an email saying he was working from home?
Yes, he would do that occasionally, work from home. Either he would say it's because sick or some other personal reasons.
Okay. Now, when it's not uncommon, is it, for engineers to often work at home? I mean, all you really need is a computer, right?
That's true normally, but in my team, most of the people actually do show up at work.
Okay. And on a few occasions between March and April, you say that he told you he was going to stay at home and work.
Not regularly. I mean, he would come in, but occasionally he would work from home for a couple of days a week, maybe. Yeah.
All right. And so, do you remember the week of April the 3rd to about the 6th or somewhere around there? Do you remember that week in particular, whether he had called you or emailed you and notified you that he wasn't feeling well or wasn't going to come to work?
Yes, actually, I do remember. It was Wednesday of that week when he emailed me that he's not feeling well and work from home, and he did not come into work on Wednesday or Thursday.
Did that concern you at all?
Not feeling well, I mean, that's, we encourage people if they're not feeling well to work from home. So Wednesday was fine. Thursday, I did not hear from him. But Friday, I was a little concerned.
Okay. And during the time that he worked for you, did you ever just see any signs of intoxication or impairment while he was at work?
No, not to my knowledge.
Are you aware of him having a DWI, say in February? Did you know of that?
I did not know that.
Did you know about his arrest in December 2011 for possession of marijuana in Tugia, Texas? Did you know about that?
Not till I read in the papers.
Okay. So was it until after his arrest for this incident that you learned about his drug use and his arrest and things like
That's
that?
right.
Okay. Did it come as a shock to you that when you heard about this incident?
Yes.
Why so?
Well, I mean, he worked with us professionally, somebody we knew, so it was a shock.
We'll pass it on to Sean.
Mr. Aurora?
Yes.
Am I saying it correctly?
Yes, that's right.
My name is Bill Bishop. I just have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Does Hewlett-Packard have any sort of spring break programs?
A spring break?
You don't get a week off for spring
No,
break.
we do not. No.
And you indicated that on April 4th, which was the Wednesday, you got an email from Mr. Daniel saying he was sick but would work from home.
That's right.
Did you ever check to see if any work was done on that day?
No, he was online. A couple of emails. I don't remember how many emails he sent me, but one was in the morning, and he said I'll try to work from home as I can. But I didn't really check that he did something that day. No.
So to this day, you still haven't gone back and checked if he was working or not working?
It's hard to tell if actually somebody's. It's not really easy to tell. They have programming at home, and it's not really easy for me to tell.
And then on Thursday, he did not show up and did not email.
That's correct.
And then you said you were really worried on Friday.
Friday, yes. Normally, if people don't come and they do write me a note or tell the team that I'm working from home.
And did you find out Friday that he was in custody to that morning on?
Yes, that afternoon
To the news?
for the news.
And you described hearing about his drug use leading up to this event as from the news,
Yes.
from the trial, things of that nature. But immediately prior, essentially 2 weeks before this event, he received your promotion. Is that true?
I don't remember the exact date, but he did receive a promotion. I remember that, yes.
Do you remember in a conversation, it was actually a written conversation you had with HP Legal, you indicated to them that his most recent promotion was March 22nd, 2012.
Possible, yeah.
You don't have any reason to believe that what you said back then is incorrect.
No, he received a promotion while he was at HP. I know that. It was proposed by his previous manager, but since I was his manager at that time, when the promotion became effective, then I was the one who communicated to him. But I just don't remember the month or the day.
And so you have no reason to think that your written response of March 22nd, 2012 is incorrect?
No?
I have no further questions.
Minutes, excuse you.
Yes. Thank you.
Defense would call Officer Croker.
Sorry, swear the testimony you will now give, will not give him before the court, to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes.
Good afternoon, Officer Croker.
Good afternoon, sir.
You've already been sworn, but now you've been sworn twice. So.
Yes, sir.
But I just want to ask you a few questions about something that was brought up after you testified earlier in the trial.
Okay.
All right. Do you remember a incident about 2 days before Officer Padron shooting on April 4th of 2012, where you and Officer Padron investigated a suspicious vehicle call?
Yes, sir, I do.
And can you tell me how you were alerted to that suspicious vehicle call?
I believe we were dispatched to the call. It came out titled suspicious vehicle. The text in the call stated, I believe a vehicle was parked in this apartment complex, and the door was left open.
Okay. And yourself and Officer Padron responded to that call, correct?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell me, when you went there and saw the vehicle, did you find the vehicle with its door open?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what action did you take, if anything, after you saw the vehicle with its door open?
I believe we were flagged down by the complainant, a female, standing outside in the parking lot next to the vehicle, just stating that that's the vehicle. I don't recall the make and model. It might have been a truck. and the door was found to be open. The vehicle was unoccupied. Our routine, our protocol is you run the license plate, you look for any involvement, an address, a phone number to try and locate the owner of the vehicle. I honestly don't recall the address it came back to, but I'm pretty sure it did not come back to that location, because if it did, we certainly would have tried to knock on the door of the apartment
Okay.
to locate the owner.
So two things. First, you said you were flagged down by the complainant. It was a female.
Yes, sir.
Did you later come to learn that the female that had called it in was a 911 operator?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, and the second part of that is, you said that you tried to find an address for the vehicle and then weren't able to find an address. Is that correct?
I'm sure we found an address. It just did not come back to that location.
Didn't come back to that apartment complex.
Correct.
Okay. And so that night, yourself and Officer Padron were not able to make contact with the owner of the vehicle or find the apartment where that person lived.
Correct.
Okay. So on that evening of April 4th, did you make contact with a Kelvin Davis with regard to that vehicle?
I do not recall that, sir.
Okay. And on that evening, you didn't make contact with Brandon Daniel either, did you?
No, sir.
Okay. Because you would certainly remember that now, some years later, correct?
Well, at that time, I had never met Brandon Daniels, so
Okay.
it
But
might
at
not.
least
Yeah, I mean,
on April 4th, you were sure you didn't make contact with
I'm 99% sure. I don't recall every detail of that call. I remember the call, going to it, but pretty sure we did not make contact with anybody. We locked the vehicle up or shut the door.
Thank you, Officer Grover. Pass the witness.
Officer Kroger, did you determine the person that vehicle came back to?
When you run the license plate, dispatch will inform you the owner, most likely over the radio, giving a name and address.
In this case, who did you determine the vehicle belonged to?
I don't recall the name, sir.
May I approach her? So Kroger, can you tell me what I'm handing you here?
Looks like information on the return of the vehicle.
Is that information you rely on when you call in a description of a vehicle and then dispatch advises you who the vehicle comes back to?
Yes, sir.
If somebody has registered a vehicle and they move, would the registration more likely show their most past address, or if it's not been updated, would it show their recent address?
Well, they certainly have to update, with the DMV, but yeah, most likely that's going to be their previous address if they have not updated it.
So although the location at this apartment was not the address on the registration, who was the owner of the vehicle that you went out there investigating on?
Well, this here highlight shows Kelvin Dante Davis.
Kelvin Dante Davis. And then that's the vehicle, the door was open, and you spoke with the lady who had worked, what did she work at?
I believe she's a 911 call taker. She lived in that area. She saw the vehicle and just called it in.
And Officer Jaime Padron also responded with you on this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall, specifically, what Officer Padron was doing on the scene?
I do not recall exactly.
There was nothing that stood out in your mind about this call, was there?
No, sir.
And this kind of normal thing that you would respond to a service call like this?
Yes, sir. Very common.
Often it's so unimportant that you may not do an offense report or anything like that.
No, that would not require a report.
And you did not do one in this case.
No, sir, I did not.
But you did determine where the vehicle was located and who the vehicle belonged to, correct?
I believe so. Yes, if that's in the report, that's the printout?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so that's correct.
Kelvin Dante Davis. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And this occurred at about what time of the day or night?
It looks like 1:10 in the morning.
Okay, 1 o'clock a.m., and this is on April 4th, correct?
Yes, sir.
Of 2012. Do you recall also later that morning working a collision, assisting with the collision at about 9 o'clock in the morning? I'm sorry, 9 o'clock in the evening. That same April 4th, 9 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, so that would have been a different shift. At that time, we were working a graveyard, so I got off around 6 in the morning, went home, slept, came back to work the next